My stepmom faked a pregnancy. Then my dad planned a baby shower. Until I found her secret blog. I never thought I'd feel this kind of betrayal from someone so close to me. The moment my stepmom, Karen, announced her unexpected pregnancy at dinner, I felt a chill run down my spine. My dad's eyes sparkled with joy, while my heart sank into a pit of confusion and disbelief. The room erupted in cheers, and I forced a smile, clapping along with my family. But something about her announcement didn't sit right with me. It felt like a carefully orchestrated performance. I glanced at Karen, who wore a smile that seemed almost too perfect, too rehearsed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just good news. As my dad began to plan a grand baby shower, complete with a theme and guest list, I felt a growing unease. I couldn't help but wonder why she had chosen now to make such a big announcement. It was as if she was trying to secure her place in our family, and I had to know why. That night, I found myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I remembered how Karen had always been a bit controlling, especially about her image in front of my dad. The thought that she might go to such lengths to manipulate us made my stomach churn. I decided I needed to dig deeper. The next day, I started with the easiest thing, social media. I scoured her posts, looking for any hints or inconsistencies, but everything seemed normal on the surface. It was only when I stumbled upon a private blog she had linked in a comment that my heart raced with a mix of dread and curiosity. The title, The Perfect Family Plan, made my skin crawl. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I clicked the link, and as I read, my heart sank further. Karen detailed her elaborate scheme to fake a pregnancy, complete with timelines, excuses, and even potential reactions from my dad and me. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut, and I could hardly breathe as the reality of her deception began to sink in. She wrote about how she believed this would secure her marriage, how a baby would make my dad fall in love with her all over again. It was chilling to read her cold calculations, her plans laid out as if she were discussing a grocery list. I felt a surge of anger mixed with a deep sense of betrayal. How could she do this to us? As I closed the laptop, my mind raced with possibilities. I had to confront her, but how? I couldn't just blurt it out. She would deny everything. Instead, I decided to observe her closely, to look for any signs that would confirm my worst fears. I needed proof, something undeniable. The days passed, and I watched her every move, noting the little things that seemed off. She was unusually attentive to my dad, catering to his every whim, and I noticed her frequent trips to the bathroom, which she always tried to make seem casual. Each time, my suspicion deepened, and I felt the walls closing in around me. I decided to confront her privately, away from my dad's prying eyes. I planned it meticulously, choosing a moment when we were alone in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator drowning out any potential eavesdroppers. My heart raced as I rehearsed what I would say, but I knew I had to tread carefully. When a moment came, I took a deep breath, my palms sweaty against the cool countertop. "Karen, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up from the dish she was washing, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure of how to approach the subject without revealing too much. "I heard about the pregnancy, and I want to make sure you're okay." I watched her closely, searching for any flicker of guilt or hesitation. Instead, she flashed a bright smile, too bright, too rehearsed. "Of course I'm fine. Just excited to start this new chapter," she replied, her voice dripping with enthusiasm. But I could see the flicker of something behind her eyes. Was it fear? I knew then that I was onto something, and the confrontation would have to wait. I needed to gather more evidence before I could expose her. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I had to figure out a way to reveal the truth, to protect my dad from this web of lies. The baby shower was coming up, and I realized that might be the perfect opportunity to confront her publicly. But first, I needed to dig deeper and find more proof. The thought of exposing her in front of the family was daunting, but I couldn't let her manipulate us any longer. I needed to ensure that my dad wouldn't be blindsided by her deception. The stakes were high, and I could feel the pressure building as I prepared for what lay ahead. The next few days felt like a blur, a cacophony of emotions swirling in my mind. I watched as my stepmom, Linda, glowed with a false brightness, basking in the attention of my dad and our family. It was both infuriating and heartbreaking to see how easily they accepted her news, while I felt a gnawing doubt that threatened to consume me. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded of the blog, the plan she had laid out like a sinister roadmap to manipulation. My dad, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, began planning a grand baby shower. The excitement in his voice made my stomach twist. I wanted to scream that this was all a lie, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I played the part of the supportive daughter, feigning enthusiasm while my mind raced with questions about Linda's true intentions. It was during one of those forced smiles that I noticed something odd. Linda had a habit of rubbing her belly, a gesture that seemed overly rehearsed. I caught her glancing at me, her expression flickering between pride and something darker, an almost predatory satisfaction. It made my skin crawl, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was testing me, gauging how much I knew. The tension reached a boiling point one evening as we sat around the dinner table. My dad was recounting his day, oblivious to the undercurrents of discomfort swirling around us. I decided to bring up the baby shower, casually mentioning how I could help with the planning. Linda's eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of irritation crossing her face before she plastered on a smile. "Oh, honey, I have it all under control," she chirped, but the tightness in her voice betrayed her. After dinner, I retreated to my room, the weight of my suspicions heavy on my shoulders. I pulled out my phone, staring at the blog I had bookmarked. The words danced in front of me, a chilling reminder of the betrayal lurking just beneath the surface. I reread the entries, trying to reconcile the loving stepmom I had known with the woman who had meticulously plotted this deception. How could she do this to my dad? To us? That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying every interaction with Linda in my mind, searching for inconsistencies. I remembered how she had casually mentioned a doctor's appointment, but when I pressed for details, she had brushed me off with vague responses. I recalled the way she had avoided my questions about her cravings, her supposed fatigue. Each moment I recalled only deepened my resolve to expose her lies. The following day, I decided to confront her privately. I waited until my dad left for work and then approached her in the living room. "Can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded, a hint of wariness creeping into her expression. As I sat down, I felt the gravity of the moment settle around us like a thick fog. I took a deep breath, ready to dive into the heart of the matter. "I've been doing some thinking about your pregnancy." I started, watching her reaction closely. Her smile faltered, and for a brief moment, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. But just as quickly, she masked it with a facade of concern. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone deceptively sweet. It felt like a trap, and I was walking right into it. I pressed on, determined to get to the truth. "I just want to make sure everything is okay. You seem a bit off lately, and I know how stressful this can be." I watched as her composure began to crack, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. "I'm fine, really. Just a little tired," she replied too quickly, her eyes darting away from mine. The inconsistencies piled up, and I felt the anger bubbling beneath my calm exterior. The conversation spiraled into a tangled web of half-truths and evasions. I could feel her trying to manipulate the narrative, to paint me as the ungrateful daughter questioning her happiness. But I wasn't going to back down. I'd seen the blog. I knew the truth. Yet, with every denial she uttered, I felt a twinge of guilt creeping in. Was I really prepared to destroy her carefully constructed illusion? As she continued to deflect my questions, I felt a sense of urgency growing within me. I needed to gather more evidence, to find something concrete that would expose her before the baby shower. The thought of her standing there, basking in the adoration of my family, while hiding her true intentions made my blood boil. I couldn't let that happen. That evening, I decided to dig deeper into the blog. I had saved the link, and I knew I needed to capture screenshots of her confessions, the very plan she had laid out for her deceit. Each word I read made my stomach churn, but I couldn't look away. I felt like a detective uncovering a crime. piecing together the puzzle of her betrayal. This was more than just a lie. It was a calculated attempt to secure her place in our family at any cost. As I clicked through the posts, I stumbled upon a comment section filled with encouragement from her followers. They praised her for her strength and creativity, unaware of the twisted reality behind her facade. It made me sick to my stomach. I realized that this wasn't just about me and my dad. It was about the people who would be hurt by her lies. I had to act, and soon, the plan began to take shape in my mind. I would gather the evidence, and at the baby shower, I would reveal everything. The thought sent shivers down my spine, but it was the only way to protect my dad from her manipulation. I could already envision the shocked expressions on my family's faces, the disbelief that would ripple through the room as the truth emerged. It was a gamble, but one I was willing to take. I felt a mix of determination and dread as I prepared for the confrontation ahead. I was walking a tightrope, balancing my loyalty to my dad with the need to expose Linda. The stakes were higher than ever, and I knew I had to be ready for whatever fallout might follow. But I couldn't let fear paralyze me. The truth had to come out. The baby shower was just days away, and I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. I spent every spare moment diving into Linda's blog, reading her meticulously crafted entries about her pregnancy. Each post was a calculated performance, a web of deceit spun with the intent to ensnare my dad and our family. The deeper I dug, the more my stomach churned with the realization that this was far worse than I had imagined. I stumbled upon a post titled "The Plan," and it felt like a punch to the gut. Linda detailed her intentions to fake it until she makes it, claiming that a baby would bring our fractured family closer. My heart raced as I read her words. This was no casual whim. This was a calculated scheme, and she had already started laying the groundwork for her deception. I felt sick knowing she was willing to manipulate everyone around her for her own gain. With each entry, I noticed inconsistencies in her timeline. She mentioned doctor's appointments and prenatal vitamins, but I recalled her dismissing my dad's concern about her health just a few weeks prior. The more I connected the dots, the clearer it became that she was spinning a narrative to suit her needs. I could feel my resolve strengthening. I needed to gather more evidence before I confronted her again. I decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting Linda outright, I began to discreetly ask my dad about his conversations with her. I casually brought up the topic of the baby, gauging his reaction. Each time I mentioned it, I could see a glimmer of excitement in his eyes, but there was also an undercurrent of uncertainty. It was as if he sensed something was off, but couldn't quite put his finger on it. That uncertainty only fueled my determination to uncover the truth. After a few days of this quiet investigation, I reached out to my closest friend, Mia, who had been my sounding board throughout this ordeal. I shared my findings, and she was equally horrified. "You have to expose her, Sarah. This is not just a harmless lie. It's a betrayal to your dad and to you," she urged. I knew she was right, but the thought of the fallout made my heart race. What if my dad didn't believe me? What if he chose Linda over me? Mia suggested we do a little more digging together. We combed through Linda's social media accounts, looking for anything that might corroborate my suspicions. It didn't take long before we found a post where she tagged a friend in a photo from a baby shower she attended, except the date was before she had supposedly become pregnant. My blood ran cold. This was a glaring inconsistency, and it could be the evidence I needed to confront her. Feeling emboldened, I decided to confront Linda again, but this time I would be armed with proof. I crafted a list of her blog entries and social media posts that contradicted her narrative. I rehearsed what I would say, but each time I did, my heart pounded harder. The fear of how she might react loomed over me like a dark cloud. But I couldn't let that stop me. I had to do this for my dad, for our family. As the days ticked down to the baby shower, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I knew I was running out of time, and the pressure was mounting. Every time I saw Linda, I could feel the tension crackling between us, a silent battle brewing beneath the surface. I watched her carefully, looking for any signs of her unraveling, but she seemed as composed as ever, a mask of calm that only deepened my resolve to expose her. The night before the shower, I stayed up late, poring over everything I'd gathered. I felt like a detective piecing together a case. Each piece of evidence was a step closer to unveiling the truth. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to change everything. I needed to be ready for the fallout, for the anger, and for the possibility that my dad might not take my side. But the truth was all that mattered now. As I lay in bed, I could hear the faint sounds of Linda preparing for the next day's festivities. The laughter and chatter from the living room felt like a mockery of my turmoil. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of why I was doing this. I couldn't let her deceit continue to poison our family. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was electric, buzzing with excitement over the baby shower. Linda flitted around like a butterfly, adjusting decorations and humming to herself, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I could barely focus on the cheerful chatter as I paced in my room, my mind racing with the implications of what I had discovered. Each word I read on that blog echoed in my head, twisting the knife of betrayal deeper into my heart. As I made my way downstairs, I spotted my dad in the kitchen, a proud smile on his face as he arranged snacks. "Can you believe it? We're going to be grandparents," he exclaimed, his joy radiating through the room. I felt a pang of guilt. How could I ruin this moment for him? But I knew I had to. The truth was too important to ignore, and I couldn't let Linda manipulate him any longer. The guests began to arrive, each one more excited than the last, showering Linda with compliments and gifts. I watched from the sidelines, my stomach churning as I caught snippets of their conversations. "I can't wait to see the nursery," one of Linda's friends gushed. "What a blessing," another added. Their naive enthusiasm felt like a dagger, each word reinforcing the lie that was being celebrated. I had to find a way to make them see the truth before it was too late. I retreated to the corner of the living room, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. The blog was still open, the words glaring back at me like an accusation. I scrolled through it again, desperate to find something, anything, that could help me expose Linda. My heart raced as I noticed a comment section filled with messages from people who believed her story, praising her for her bravery. It made my blood boil. These people were unwittingly complicit in her deception. Just then, I spotted my old friend Mia entering the room, her eyes lighting up as she saw me. We hadn't talked much since high school, but I knew she would be supportive. "Hey," she said, wrapping me in a warm hug. "I heard about the baby. How exciting." Her enthusiasm felt like a weight pressing down on me. I hesitated, searching for the right words to tell her the truth without sounding insane. But the moment slipped away as Linda called for everyone's attention. Linda stood in the center of the room, beaming as she thanked everyone for coming. She spoke about her dreams for the baby, how she envisioned family outings and birthday parties. Each word felt like a betrayal, a dagger in my heart. I glanced at my dad, his eyes misty with joy, and I felt a wave of nausea. This was all a facade, and I had to break it down before it became too entrenched. As Linda continued to speak, I caught sight of her phone on the table, screen lit up. An idea sparked in my mind. If I could just get a glimpse of her messages, maybe I could find more proof. I waited for the right moment, my heart pounding as I casually strolled past the table. But before I could reach for it, one of her friends leaned in, exclaiming over a gift. I froze, the opportunity slipping away like sand through my fingers. Frustrated, I pulled away from the crowd, my mind racing with alternatives. I needed to think clearly, to strategize. Maybe I could plant a seed of doubt among the guests. Let them question Linda's narrative. I could approach them casually, ask them if they'd seen anything odd. If I could get just one person to see through her facade, it might create a ripple effect. As I mulled over my plan, I overheard Linda laughing with a few guests. Her laughter felt so hollow, a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was putting on a show, carefully crafting her image while hiding the truth behind it. The pressure was rising, and I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice. I had to act, and soon. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, pulling my attention. I rushed in to find one of the serving trays toppled over, snacks scattered everywhere. Linda was already on her knees, frantically picking up the mess, her face flushed with embarrassment. I seized the moment, my heart racing as I approached her. "Need a hand?" I offered, forcing a smile, while my mind raced with thoughts of how to confront her. As we cleaned up, I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "I know what you're doing, Linda. It's only a matter of time before everyone finds out." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but she quickly masked it with a tight smile. "What are you talking about?" she replied, feigning innocence. I could see the tension in her shoulders. She was on edge, and it felt like a small victory. But I needed more than just a hunch to expose her. The commotion in the kitchen drew the attention of several guests, and I felt the pressure mounting. I had to keep my composure. As Linda and I exchanged terse words, I noticed Mia peeking in, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. I caught her eye, silently pleading for her to understand. If I could get her to question Linda, it might just create the crack I needed to break the facade. After we finished cleaning, I pulled Mia aside, my heart racing. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I asked, urgency lacing my voice. She nodded, her brows furrowing in concern as I led her away from the crowd. I took a deep breath, ready to spill the truth, but the words felt heavy in my throat. How could I explain something so absurd, yet so real? I had to choose my words carefully, or I risked losing her trust. As I began to recount my suspicions, I could see the skepticism in Mia's eyes. "I know it sounds crazy, but I found this blog. Linda is faking her pregnancy to keep my dad from leaving her," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Are you sure?" she asked, her tone cautious. I nodded, pulling out my phone to show her the blog. The words on the screen felt like a bomb ready to explode. Mia's eyes widened as she read through the entries, disbelief washing over her. "This is insane," she exclaimed, glancing back at the party. "You have to tell everyone." But I hesitated, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. What if they didn't believe me? What if Linda spun it around and made me the villain? The pressure was rising, and I could feel the clock ticking down to the moment I had to make my move. The party continued around us, laughter and chatter filling the air, but I felt like I was in a bubble, isolated from the reality everyone else was enjoying. I knew I had to act soon. The longer I waited, the more entrenched Linda's lies would become. But how? How could I expose her without tearing apart my family in the process? I was running out of time, and I needed a plan. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. I could see Linda chatting animatedly with my dad, her hands gesturing as she spoke about nursery colors and baby names, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I had to remind myself that this was all a facade, a carefully constructed lie that I was determined to dismantle. The baby shower was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but for me, it felt like a ticking time bomb. I could feel my heart racing as I mulled over my options. Should I wait until the right moment to expose her? Or should I confront her now, while the party was still in full swing? My instincts screamed at me to act, but I knew I had to be strategic. If I went in guns blazing, I risked losing my family's support and, worse, giving Linda the opportunity to spin the narrative in her favor. As I moved through the crowd, I overheard snippets of conversations about baby clothes and parenting advice, each word twisting the knife deeper in my gut. The more I listened, the more I realized how deep Linda's manipulation ran. Everyone was so eager to believe her, so invested in this dream of a new family member that they wouldn't even consider the possibility of deceit. I felt like an outsider in my own home, a lone voice crying out against a tide of blind faith. I made my way to the kitchen, where the chaos of the party faded into a dull roar. I needed a moment to think, to gather my thoughts. That's when I noticed my cousin Mia sitting alone at the table, her phone in hand. She had always been the kind of person who could read the room, and I wondered if she could sense the tension between Linda and me. I approached her, trying to gauge her thoughts without revealing too much. "Hey, Mia," I said, forcing a smile. "What do you think about all this?" I gestured vaguely toward the living room, where the party was in full swing. She looked up, her brow furrowing slightly. "Honestly, it feels a little off. Like, I don't know, something just doesn't add up." Her honesty was a small comfort, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in my suspicions. "Exactly." I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. Have you noticed how over-the-top Linda is being? It's like she's trying too hard to sell this whole pregnancy thing. Mia nodded, her eyes widening in understanding. I've thought the same. It's almost like she's trying to convince herself more than anyone else. We exchanged knowing glances, the weight of our shared suspicion hanging heavily between us. Mia's support gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I had to act, but I needed to do it carefully. If I could just gather a few more pieces of evidence, maybe I could sway the family's perception before Linda had a chance to turn the tables. I excused myself from Mia and slipped back into the living room, scanning the crowd for an opportunity to gather intel. That's when I spotted Linda's phone, carelessly left on the table beside her purse. My heart raced at the thought of what I might find. I hesitated for a moment, weighing the risk against the potential reward. If I could find any incriminating messages or photos, it could be the final nail in her coffin. Steeling myself, I glanced around to ensure no one was watching before I made my move. I quickly grabbed the phone and opened it, praying it wasn't locked. To my relief, it wasn't. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through her messages, each one a potential treasure trove of lies. Most were mundane, but then I stumbled upon a thread with a friend discussing the baby plans. Except they read more like a script than genuine excitement. Words like fake and act leaped off the screen, sending chills down my spine. I barely had time to process the implications before I heard a voice behind me. "What are you doing?" It was Linda, her tone sharp and accusatory. My heart dropped as I turned to face her, the phone still in my hand. I quickly pocketed it, but the damage was done. Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind, plotting her next move. I had to think fast. Just checking on the party details, I lied, forcing a casual smile. You know how it is, making sure everything goes smoothly. Her gaze lingered on me, suspicion etched on her face, but she eventually relented, her smile returning, albeit a bit forced. I could tell she was rattled, and it gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. I had put her on the defensive, even if only for a moment. As I rejoined the party, I felt the urgency of my mission intensify. I needed to expose Linda, but I also had to protect my family from the fallout. I could already see my dad's excitement, his genuine happiness, and it twisted my stomach in knots. How could I shatter his joy without destroying him in the process? The stakes were rising, and I knew I had to be meticulous in my planning. I spent the next hour mingling, keeping my eyes peeled for any further clues or inconsistencies in Linda's story. Each laugh, each shared moment felt like a betrayal, and the weight of my secret grew heavier. I needed to prepare for the moment I would reveal the truth, to ensure it would hit hard enough to break through the fog of deception that had settled over my family. But how could I make them see the reality without turning against me? As the party wound down, I gathered Mia and pulled her aside. "I need your help," I whispered, urgency lacing my voice. "We need to figure out a way to expose Linda without making it seem like I'm just attacking her. If we can get the family to see her for who she really is, maybe they'll come to their own conclusions." Mia nodded, her expression serious. "I'm in. Let's make sure we do this right." With a plan forming between us, I felt a surge of determination. The lies were crumbling, and I was ready to bring the truth to light. The next steps would be crucial, and I knew I had to be strategic. I just hoped it wouldn't cost me everything I held dear. As I prepared for the baby's shower, the weight of my plan pressed heavily on my chest. I had gathered enough evidence to support my claims, but the stakes felt impossibly high. The last thing I wanted was to hurt my dad, but I couldn't let my stepmom's deception continue. Each day that passed felt like a ticking time bomb, and I needed to act before it exploded. The morning of the shower, I found myself staring at my phone, contemplating my next move. I had saved a link to the blog on my notes app, ready to unleash it at the perfect moment. My heart raced at the thought of exposing her lies, but the fear of the fallout kept creeping in. Will my dad believe me? Would he even want to believe me? I decided to text my best friend, Rachel, for a little moral support. "Can you come over before the shower? I need to run something by you." I typed, my fingers trembling. Her quick response, "Of course. I'll be there in 20, gave me a slight sense of relief. I needed someone who could help me process what was about to unfold. When Rachel arrived, I wasted no time. I showed her the blog and explained everything that had happened leading up to this moment. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the posts, disbelief etched across her face. "This is insane, Emma. You have to tell your dad. He deserves to know the truth," she urged, her voice steady but concerned. We spent the next hour discussing how I could present the information without it seeming like an attack. I wanted to ensure that my dad understood the gravity of the situation, not just the betrayal. Rachel suggested I gather everyone in a quiet moment, maybe when the excitement peaked. That way, I could present my findings without chaos overshadowing the truth. As the shower began, I watched my stepmom flit around, soaking in the attention. She looked radiant, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I felt a pang of sadness for my dad, who was completely oblivious to the web of deceit surrounding him. The thought of him being crushed by the truth made my stomach churn, but I steeled myself for what was to come. I took a deep breath and made my way to the kitchen, where the cake was being prepared. My heart raced as I spotted my dad chatting with a few relatives, laughing and enjoying the moment. This was a man who had always been my rock, and now I was about to shake his world. I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. The truth needed to come out. As I glanced at Rachel, she gave me an encouraging nod. It was time to test the waters. I approached my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, can we talk for a second?" He looked up, surprised but smiling. "Sure, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I could hear the laughter from the party behind us, a stark contrast to the heaviness in my heart. We stepped outside to the patio, where the noise faded slightly. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important, about the baby. I think you need to know what's really going on." His expression shifted from curiosity to concern, and I felt the weight of my confession pressing down. Before I could continue, my stepmom appeared, a bright smile plastered on her face. "Oh, there you are. Everyone is waiting for you," she interjected, oblivious to the tension in the air. I could feel my resolve wavering as I watched her, the embodiment of deception. I needed to push through this moment, but her presence felt like a wall blocking my path. I forced a smile, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "Just a moment, Mom. I was just telling Dad something important," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of suspicion crossing her features. But before she could probe further, I knew I had to shift the focus back to my plan. "Why don't we all gather around the cake? I have something I want to share with everyone," I suggested, trying to sound casual. My heart pounded as I turned back to my dad, who nodded, clearly intrigued. I took a deep breath, preparing to set the stage for the truth. The moment was drawing near, and I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. As we gathered everyone around the table, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I could see the excitement in my stepmom's eyes, completely unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. I glanced at Rachel, who gave me an encouraging thumbs up from the back of the crowd. This was it. I was ready to reveal the truth, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the aftermath would change everything. With everyone's attention on me, I pulled out my phone, ready to show them the blog. The atmosphere shifted, a sense of anticipation filling the air. I cleared my throat, preparing to speak, but a wave of doubt washed over me. Would they believe me? Would they side with her? The thought made my stomach churn, but I knew I had to take the leap. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me. Every eye trained on my phone. The flicker of doubt pulsed through my veins. What if this backfired? My heart raced as I opened the blog, the words leaping off the screen like daggers. The title alone was enough to send chills down my spine. How to Fake a Pregnancy, a Guide to Keeping Him. Before I could read further, my stepmom's voice cut through the tension. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her tone sharp and defensive. I glanced up, her eyes narrowed, desperation etched across her face. It was a clear warning, but I couldn't back down now. I had come too far. The family was still buzzing with excitement, oblivious to the storm brewing between us. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of all the times I'd felt her manipulation creeping into our lives. The fake smiles, the forced laughter, it all made sense now. This was her last-ditch effort to cling to a marriage that was unraveling. I scrolled through the blog, each entry more shocking than the last. She had meticulously planned every detail, from fake ultrasounds to stage cravings. My stomach churned as I read about her intentions to secure my dad's loyalty, as if a child could bind him to her forever. This wasn't just a lie. It was a betrayal of everything our family stood for. Just then, my dad walked into the room, his cheerful demeanor oblivious to the tension. "What's all this?" he asked, looking from me to my stepmom. I could see her panic rising, the facade cracking under the weight of her deceit. My heart raced. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, yet the stakes felt impossibly high. I glanced at my dad, who was still blissfully unaware of the chaos swirling around him. My throat felt dry, and I knew I had to act before she could spin her story. "Dad, you need to see this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I turned the phone toward him, the screen glowing with damning evidence. He leaned in, squinting at the words, confusion washing over his face. "What is this?" he asked, his brow furrowing. The room fell silent, and I could feel the tension crackling like static electricity. I knew I was crossing a line, but the truth had to come out, no matter the cost. As he read, I could see the gears turning in his mind. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally to anger. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice rising. I could see my stepmom's mask slipping, her confidence evaporating like mist in the sun. This was it. The truth was finally surfacing. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. "You don't understand. I was doing this for us," she pleaded, her eyes darting between my dad and me. "I just wanted to keep our family together." But her words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to manipulate the narrative. I could see my dad's face hardening, the betrayal cutting deeper than I ever imagined. "You think lying to me would keep us together?" He shot back, his voice filled with disbelief. The room was electric, the air thick with tension. I could feel my heart racing as I prepared for the fallout. The family that had once felt so united was now a fragile web of trust unraveling before my eyes. I glanced at my stepmom, who was now visibly shaking. Her bravado had crumbled, revealing the raw fear beneath. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered, her voice cracking. But it was too late for apologies. The damage was done, and the truth was out. My dad took a step back, his expression a mix of hurt and anger. "I can't believe you would do this to us," he said, his voice trembling. I could see the weight of the revelation crashing down on him, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of guilt. But it was overshadowed by the need for justice, for truth. As the reality of the situation settled in, I could hear murmurs of disbelief from the family members who had gathered around. The excitement of the baby shower had vanished, replaced by shock and confusion. I felt a surge of empowerment, knowing I had finally stood up against the manipulation that had plagued our lives. But even as I relished the moment, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. What would happen next? The fallout from this revelation was bound to be explosive, and I knew that the family dynamic would never be the same. My stepmom was facing social ostracism, and my dad was grappling with betrayal. The tension hung thick in the air, and I realized that I had set off a chain reaction that could not be undone. My heart raced as I thought about the implications for my stepmom, for my dad, and for me. I had exposed the truth, but at what cost? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the inevitable plunge. The whispers around the room grew louder, and I caught snippets of conversations. People speculating about my stepmom's motives, her future, and my dad's reaction. It was all spiraling out of control, and I knew I had to brace myself for the aftermath. I had fought for the truth, but now I was left wondering if it was worth it. My heart raced as I faced the stunned silence of my family. My stepmom stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief, as the reality of her deception crashed down around her. I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had taken the risk, and now the truth was out. But the victory felt hollow amidst the chaos that followed. My dad's expression morphed from confusion to anger, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "What the hell is this?" he finally shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of betrayal and disbelief. The room was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on us. It was a surreal moment, one that would forever change our family dynamic. Stepmom's facade began to crack as she stammered, searching for words to defend herself. "This isn't what it looks like," she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. But the evidence was undeniable, the blog's words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. I could see my relatives whispering, their faces contorting with shock and judgment. In that moment, I felt a mix of triumph and dread. I had fought so hard to reveal the truth, yet I never imagined it would come at such a cost. My stepmom had manipulated not just me, but our entire family, and now the fallout was palpable. I could sense the shift in the atmosphere. The warmth of family love was replaced by a chilling distrust. As my dad stepped closer to my stepmom, his voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "How could you do this?" His eyes burned with hurt, and I could see him grappling with the reality of the woman he thought he knew. I felt a pang of guilt for being the one to expose her, yet I reminded myself that I had done it for our family's sake. My stepmom, realizing her hold on the room was slipping, attempted to regain control. "You don't understand. I was trying to save our marriage," she cried, her voice breaking. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The room was filled with skepticism. No one was buying her excuses anymore, and I felt a flicker of hope that the truth might actually set us free. Then one of my aunts, usually the peacemaker, stepped forward, her face a mix of sympathy and anger. "You need to take responsibility for this, Lisa," she said, her voice steady. "You've hurt everyone with your lies." I watched as my stepmom's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally, but she found none. It was as if the very foundation of her world was crumbling. The tension escalated, and my dad's voice rose again, cutting through the murmurs. "You've made a mockery of our family," he shouted, his fists clenched. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, caught in the crossfire of my stepmom's desperate attempts to cling to a life that was built on deception. It was heartbreaking to witness, yet I knew this was necessary for our healing. As the conversations swirled around me, I caught snippets of discussions about how to move forward. My relatives began to distance themselves from my stepmom, some even whispering about how she should leave. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. The implications of her actions were becoming clear. She was facing not just social ostracism, but the potential end of her marriage. I took a step back, trying to process everything. The room was filled with shock, anger, and a strange sense of relief. I had exposed the truth, but I also felt the weight of what lay ahead. The family I had known was fracturing, and I wasn't sure how to navigate the aftermath of this revelation. As the baby shower cake sat untouched, I realized that the celebration had transformed into a reckoning. My stepmom's dreams of motherhood had turned into a nightmare, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility for the chaos. Yet, deep down, I knew I had acted in the best interest of our family, no matter how painful the truth was. The emotional turmoil was palpable, and I watched as my dad turned away from my stepmom, shaking his head in disbelief. I wanted to reach out to him, to comfort him, but I also knew that he needed space to process his feelings. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I felt like an outsider in my own family. Then, I heard my stepmom's voice break through the noise. "I thought this would bring us closer," she cried, her eyes glistening with tears. It was a desperate plea, but it fell flat in the face of the reality she had created. No one was willing to forgive her so easily, and I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me, despite everything. As the afternoon wore on, I watched the family dynamics shift. Conversations turned into hushed whispers, and I could see the rifts forming. My relatives were choosing sides, and I felt the weight of their judgment. I was the one who had revealed the truth, but now I was also facing the consequences of that choice. Finally, my dad turned to me, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you for telling me, even if it hurt. I needed to know the truth, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I had done the right thing, but the cost was heavy, and I wasn't sure what the future held for us. As the day came to a close, I realized that healing would take time. My stepmom was facing a potential divorce, and the social fallout would be severe. But amidst the uncertainty, I knew that I had stood up for what was right, and that was something I could hold on to as we all navigated this painful chapter together. Thanks so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed our videos, Please like, share, and subscribe to the llama if you want more drama. It truly means a lot.